I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today, I have my special guest. He is the podcast host of Dead Man Talk. He's a rock star, wrestler, author, no other than Mr. Chris Tetreault-Blay.
Hello, hi Daniel. Thank you so much for having me on. What an intro as well. Thank you.
Yes, I'm very grateful, Mr. Chris.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
What is a big difference if you are an author and you are rock stars and you are wrestlers?
I'll tell you what. So I wish I was a rock star. I wish I was a wrestler. I think I've gone through both of those dreams in my lifetime. My podcasting covers everything that I I've loved, my passions in life. So I wanted to be a pro wrestler when I was growing up. It never happened. I wanted to be a rock star. You never know. That might still happen. Um, but I guess for me, I discovered my love for, trying to pursue something that I wanted to do through by writing. I think that was the first thing that I tried my hand at. Uh, and, it seemed to work. So you never know. The other ones might come. The rock star and the wrestler may become more than dreams one day. Who knows?
Oh, yes, definitely. What age did you learn that you are good in writing?
Wow. So going back to my school days, I suppose, from about ages 7 or 8 upwards, my teachers told me I had a bit of a flair for writing. Now, my mum had a lot to do with this. She would, if I came home with homework that involved any kind of creative writing, writing poems or anything like that, or stories, she would help me a great deal. She had some great ideas. I would kind of more than plagiarize some of it, I think, down to probably she is responsible for writing some of my earlier pieces at school. I didn't like school though. I think anything that I was made to do at school, I tended not to do when I was at home. Wasn't really until I left home. I went to university when I was 18. I moved away from where I grew up to where I live now when I was 21. It wasn't until probably my early 20s that I started to branch out and think, okay, I may be able to have a go at these. You don't necessarily have to, to be a writer, you don't have to be good enough to get into one of the big publishing houses straight off. Everyone's got to start somewhere. So it wasn't until I'm trying to think where I was now, mid to late 20s, that I started to actually write anything down for myself in the form of song lyrics. I taught myself to play the guitar from when I was 18. And
Okay.
going back to my rock star dream, I always wanted to be in a band, or sing a songwriter, that kind of thing. So I started just to write lyrics that I was inspired. It was mainly sort of heavy metal, horror themed kind of stuff. That still just these songs exist. I printed them off and they exist in a folder in the deepest, darkest corner of my house somewhere. Haven't really seen the light of day. But it was those that then spurred me into, it sort of got to wearing, as it were, into writing, longer things that would become, stories and books eventually.
Yes, and I learned that you won the National Novel Writing Month.
That's right, I did. Yes, so that gave birth to my first book, Acolyte, which is the main topic of our discussion today. So I started I always say I started writing my fiction, my novels, when my wife found out she was pregnant, which a lot of people find quite funny because they make the connection that knowing I was going to be a dad caused me to write horror stories, which it depends how you look at it, I suppose, but it all started when I come to terms with this massive change that was going to happen. And the only way that I could get rid of everything that was going on in my head is to start writing stuff down. So I had a few threads of stories, a few short stories in my head that were inspired by things that I love, like horror has always been a big thing. So games like Red Silent Hill and the movies that came with them, and that I had a few stories that were inspired by those. I didn't know what to do with them. I'd partly started them. We weren't really going anywhere, and then I found one common thread that I could create that actually brought them all together as one story. And it was my wife then. She discovered National Novel Writing Month. I think it was a random Facebook post, as most of my things tend to come from. And she showed me it, and she was the one that really inspired me then. You know, why don't you challenge yourself to carry on with this and turn it into something at the end, you know, something that could be considered a book. I never had the intention of having a book published out of this. It was just a challenge for me to use. Anyone who's not familiar with National Novel Month, it takes place in November every year. The challenge is to write 50,000 words throughout November, which is what officially is classed as a novel, to be that length. So I did that. I took my stories, I developed them, worked on them every day through that November. This was November 2014, I think it was. And by the end of it, I just about a couple of days to spare, I got my 50,000 words. So I what they call that, you win National Novel Writing Month if you achieve that. And I got the opportunity as part of that then they give you like a voucher, I think, or they did back then, that you could self-publish a copy of your book through Amazon, I'm pretty sure it was. So I wanted to do that, and I thought that would be a great thing for me to have, that my kids, when they're born, I could show them, you know, I'd written something.
Definitely, it's your legacy. Oh, wow.
Yes, yeah. And I wanted to, I think my whole writing came from, before I started writing my stories, I was trying to write a diary for children. I was trying to get all the thoughts down that was going in my head. I thought, I've got to get them down. Maybe I can give them this diary when they're old enough. Definitely. They can see the kind of things that I was going through at the time. I kind of abandoned that after a couple of weeks, once my own stories, you know, Acolyte, started to come to the fore. So it was, yeah. So National Novel Writing Month got me to that point, but then beyond that, I didn't self-publish a copy of my book like I was aiming to. And then the opportunity came along to actually have it published properly with an independent publisher.
So let's talk about your book one.
Yes.
So why do you call the Wildermoor Apocalypse trilogy?
Okay, so yeah, the whole trilogy in a nutshell, it's called the Wildermoor Apocalypse because I've based it in a fictional, like, moorland county community in the UK. I live about 10 minutes from the moors, where beautiful, barren, place. You know, you can just go up and get lost for hours and hours. And I wanted somewhere. This basically came from my fascination with the Mayan prophecy that the world was going to end in 2012. When it was back in, I think it was 2010, I first heard about this prophecy. And obviously, as it was getting closer to 2012, I was becoming more and more, I'd say I was obsessed with the idea, I suppose, because I just, you know, in my head, it's like, wow, something could actually be happening, which would change the world. You know, is the world going to end? You know, I was reading up on all these books and what the prophecy was. And it came to, I was at work, the date that is linked to, you know, being the date that the Mayans apparently predicted the end of the world as it would be, was the 21st of December 2012. I was going about my day on that day, kind of in my head, wondering, you know, what's going to happen? Lo and behold, nothing happened, and I was back at work the next day on the 22nd of December, thinking, in a weird way, what an anticlimax. You know, the world is kind of how I left it. So that I kept thinking then, well, what if something had happened? But it was happened somewhere in the world that was really quite remote, that we didn't see the effects of straight away, but some sort of cosmic shift had happened somewhere, you know, far away from where most people live. So that's where I started to develop the idea of Wildermoor being this community, which is, you know, easily a couple of hours away from the nearest city. The community of themselves, they keep themselves to themselves. They you know, everything happens within these small collection of towns. So I thought, I'm going to set something there, and I'm going to tell a story of this thing that I could I could imagine had happened in 2012 that would bring about, eventually the apocalypse, maybe the end of the world. But, it's not yet hit the rest of the world. Nobody thinks anything's happened, but because it happened in this really remote place. So that's the kernels of the idea that gave way. It was going to be one book originally, and then it grew and grew, and I was like, I need to stretch it out. I've got too many ideas here. I need to probably pad it out to be a trilogy. So,
what is the meaning of the title of book one?
So Acolyte. So Acolyte, by definition, is it's a very biblical word, and there is a lot of sort of religious connotations to the story. I don't want to go too far down the spoiler route. I struggle sometimes to sum these stories up because there are so many layers in this trilogy into each book. But the essence of the idea is it stretches over 2 or 3 time periods. So it starts off in I think 2000, 2001. It goes back as it's telling the story and up to 2012. I'm actually telling the backstory as we go along as well, which goes back to the late 1600s. And the late 1600s over here in the UK, there was a lot of upheaval, sort of in politics, parliament, religion. There was different forms of religion starting to come through, and people telling people how they should worship and what they should believe. So the center of the story is a group of priests who have been forced out of their churches in Wildermoor because they would not adopt the new way of worship. They they refused to adopt the new beliefs. They wanted to wreak revenge on those who had wronged them, and they're led by a guy called Father Archibald, I think his name. It's just a long time since I've revisited this book, actually. And his idea is to basically take over the world, and he turns to dark forces in order to do it. So he sets in motion back in the late 1600s ways of summoning an evil from pretty much from the depths of hell, which will then grow over the next few hundred years and give way to whatever will happen in then the early 2000s, which would bring about the end of the world. So I didn't decide to call it Acolyte straight off. I don't think I had an idea of what I wanted to call it until as I was writing it, I realized one of the central characters was coming through, and he was a follower of Father Archibald, the one that leads this group of priests called the Council of Eternal Light. And it's through his dedication to this group and this man that his own downfall comes. And Acolyte, the meaning of Acolyte is, in the biblical sense, the religious sense, is a follower. So it really was born out of that, because the main story we're telling in this, particularly in Acolyte, is how this evil presence came about, and it is linked to this one man.
Sounds interesting.
It's a hard one. It's a hard one to put in a nutshell, like I say. So
yes. So if you have 5 adjectives, can you describe Acolyte?
Wow, that's a tricky one. I'm not sure, to be honest. So there is, obviously there's a lot of horror in there. So I say it is sort of terror, I suppose. There's evil forces wreaking havoc in there. There is a sense of, I've not really got love stories going on in this one. I will say in my books that there tends to be sort of hints at sort of humanity happening, but not a lot of it. So there is probably a hint of sort of love, devotion. The family is in there. Some of the characters in these books do things they didn't think they were going to, because they want to keep their family safe, and their own mortality as well. I think the whole point of the impending apocalypse is it faces us all with our own impending mortality at some point. And in intrigue, I like to keep the reader guessing in these books, for sure. Not trying to spell out exactly what's going to happen. I try to make sure the plot lines aren't too obvious before they happen. I don't know how many I'm up to there, to be honest with you. It's a difficult one, that.
So how many days and month you wrote this book?
Oh, this one in particular. So Acolyte. In all, I think probably here and there, it probably took me about. It was written over a span of about 6 months. Most of it happened during that November. So I think the end product of Acolyte, it was about 80 to 85 words. So 50,000 words of that was written in that. The little bits that I had before that, and like the bit that I added to it at the end and the further editing, and that probably took place over a few months after that. It wasn't something I labored out sort of all the hours of the day, because I was doing it around my day job. So I probably only had about an hour a day to dedicate to it. So yeah, I would say easily sort of over a period of about 6 months.
Ah, that's awesome. What can you say about the character of the book itself, Acolyte?
So actually, like the character in the main character in the book, you mean? Sort of.
Yes.
Okay, so again, the great thing I think in this, there's not one central character. There's one. Say there's one main one probably would be the character of the Reaper, which, as it sounds, is the more ominous figure that kind of hovers above the whole trilogy. This is the evil kind of entity that has come about from the Council of Eternal misdealings, almost, with darker forces. He appears to certain people. He is, as you would expect, a terrifying figure. Only really see him. He wears a black cloak and a hood. He's got red eyes that kind of burn in the darkness, that kind of thing. If for those who do tend to see him, his appearance is of someone who has lived in fire, essentially. Very kind of burnt, charred, very scarred person, if you can call him that. So that's the main kind of character that runs throughout it, and it's origins, his origin story, which is told in Acolyte mostly. On the flip side, the antagonist is in Acolyte, the main good guy, as it were, would be a guy called Truman Dark, who is the chief detective inspector of the local Wildermoor police. He finds himself embroiled in all of these bad things that are happening, really by doing his day job. He's trying to catch a certain criminal who's responsible for a lot of horrible murders within Wildermoor, and he's been trying for years to capture this guy, and eventually finds himself as a lead suspect in this criminal's murder. So the other half of Acolyte is really almost like his escape, his exile, and him realizing his own links to what has happened sort of 300 years previously, and sort of how he's now sort of caught up in the dark stuff that's about to come.
And who or what you inspired you the most in writing this book?
So aside, I suppose, from my unborn children, which, I mean, they were born by the time I actually started writing most of this. I mean, they gave me the inspiration to want to write, and at the beginning, they were the ones that really, it was their imminent arrival that sort of lit this passion, to write. But in terms of style, content, James Herbert was a massive influence on me. His writing style is that I've tried to not replicate, because I don't think you can replicate greatness like that. I think it's taking what I can from his style of writing and trying to make it my own. So it's his directness. If you ever read any of James Herbert, so there's no dancing around the points. If something horrific's going on or something bad, he says it as if it's an everyday occurrence, and it's that kind of raw, honest writing style that I wanted. I didn't want to kind of lose too much time with words when I can have the same impact with literally a few. And the main basis of the story comes from all of my horror influences. So things that I mentioned, like Resident Evil and Silent Hill series, those kind of dark, dreary, creepy places that come up in them. I was a great lover of Friday the 13th and the Halloween films. So an homage, if it will, to all of those sort of things, all kind of coming into one. I think it's that I touched on really. It's his directness. I think the one thing I've struggled with Stephen King is, firstly, a lot of the books I've wanted to read of his are absolutely huge. Whilst I'm a writer, I've never been. I am more so now, but I've struggled with reading, and finding time to read, and my attention span. So when I'm faced with a big book, I'll be intimidated from the off, and I probably won't see it through. Whereas James Herbert's stuff, I think you can pick them up, and they're a lot more digestible. And like I say, he can get the same, he can evoke the same horror, if not more, within me, and the sense of dread and terror and that really cold feeling that you can get from reading a really good horror story. He can do it with such fewer words. Have that knack for being able to just know how to tap into those emotions very, very quickly. And Stephen King, I felt his writing it does tend to wander a little bit too much for me. He can go off in one direction, which, you kind of lose sight sometimes of the main sort of plot point, I think, and I struggle with that. So I would just really down to, I would say just the talent of James Herbert to be able to get his point across a lot more concisely, I would say.
Yes. So how do you describe your writing in one word?
In one word? Oh,
Yes.
geez. Okay. Oh, I really don't know. I mean, to take some of the things that I've taken from some of my reviews, I suppose, a lot of people tend to use that to describe my stories, because I do like that whole the feel that something is going on, but you don't know what, but it makes you feel uncomfortable. I've really enjoyed that, and in some of my other stories, I've touched on fears of my own, and been able to really bring forth, what scares me about these things, and just trying to put that down in words. So yeah, I would say, if anything, I'm absolutely rubbish at talking about and trying to sell my own work, really, and so I rely on what other people tell me. So I'll go with that one.
Okay. I think I'm gonna interview Mr. Richard for
Yes, absolutely.
Acolyte.
Absolutely, yeah. I've got to give him a shout out, Richard. There, he helped put this together today, so thank you for him. He has been a massive support and a massive inspiration for me. We met at we had the same first publisher. So when it was first published, was with Bloodhound Books, the same as Minstrel's Bargain was, and he's been there since day one for me. So I'd love to get his take on Acolyte and the other stuff. Absolutely.
So if you're given a chance to revise again the book, which part of the book you want to change it?
This is something that I have gone through a little bit lately, because I've had Acolyte out with a few indie publishers, to varying degrees of success. And earlier this year, I decided I was going to bring. I was just going to bring it back. I've self-published it before in the past, and I thought I'm at this stage where I want it, and I want to do what I want to do with it. My biggest quandary was, do I change it? This being my first book, there is a lot in there I think I could improve. I think one of the main things is I really struggled, because I don't plan any of my books. I still don't. I'm more of what they call a pantser. I'll sit down in front of a computer with my laptop, notebook, whatever, and I'll just write what comes to my head. And this is, like I say, I didn't have the vision for Acolyte to even be published, let alone be a trilogy, when I was writing it. And I think I kind of lost my way in certain places with the timeline. Because like I say, I'm trying to tell the story across two very different timelines almost at the same time. And I think there probably are some inconsistencies in there. If we are just talking about Acolyte, we can talk on other episodes about the rest of the trilogy. There's probably other stuff I would pull out for them. But with Acolyte, it's probably, I would want to hone my skills actually planning it out to make sure everything, all the timeline did flow like it's supposed to. Like I said, I've gone back this time just before I re-released it a few weeks ago, and changed the effort changing it. But I think I heard Richard say the same as well about Minstrel's Bargain in one of his chats with you. It's kind of it's kind of as it is. This is what it was at the time. I think I just need to let it live as it is, flaws and all. But that would be it probably. Yeah, it's just really, I know that there are inconsistencies with the timeline, I reckon, in some places.
So what did you learn in writing Acolyte?
Exactly that, really. People with a planner probably, but no, I think yeah, again, not to too much, but he hit the nail on the head when he was talking about his book, his first book. I did learn straight away that being a published author is only the beginning. It's not you. That's really where the hard work starts. I had delusions, I suppose, that knowing I was going to have a book out there, that I was going to be able to give up my job and make a living from writing. That's very much not the case. So very quickly it was that baptism straight away of this is what's expected, and it's as much as the writing was such a blast, I absolutely loved in this book. What came afterwards in terms of getting the message out there and publicizing it, marketing it, getting people to know it's there, that's really where the difficulties lie. And it's something I've then, by the time I came to do the follow-on, which was my to talk about the sequel to this, I self-published that, but that was the first book I self-published, and I already had knowledge about how things worked, about the industry and what to expect and what pitfalls to try and avoid, really just from my experience with this book.
Sounds interesting.
It's an interesting journey.
It's interesting journey, mister. Give us the best highlight.
Oh, the best highlight. My favorite part of this book, again, not giving spoilers away or anything like that, but there's one film I give a nod to, and I like to do this. I'm doing it in another book as well, which it follows on from the Wildermoor Apocalypse trilogy, so it's a bit of a theme. One of my favorite films, or one of my favorite scenes in film, is from Star Wars: Revenge of the Sith. When you get that whole play out at the end of Anakin as he becomes Darth Vader, you see the change in him. You see him go from this good guy that you knew from the other films, and all of a sudden you see him become this really dark character. I have a scene like that, which is almost like a tribute, kind of. It's not a rip-off or anything like that. It was inspired heavily by that part of Revenge of the Sith, where you see this central character and how he becomes the Reaper. I knew I wanted to do that, and it was the bit of the book that I couldn't wait to get to. I didn't write it out of sequence, so I knew I had to wait to get to this part, and it was one, I think, which was almost one of the most emotional parts. You get a glimpse of how evil this Reaper is, this force is, but as the story goes on, you get to know why and how he came about. And I think when you reach that part towards the end, it's a bit of a sweet spot.
What is the moral lesson of Acolyte?
More, I don't know that there is one, if I'm honest with you. So, I don't know. It's well, don't meddle with dark forces would be the obvious one, I think, because it's really what these guys do that is going to unleash hell on Wildermoor eventually. I say stay strong to your beliefs. So if I'm going to have to go either way, it's probably something, because everyone in this book acts in a way that they think is in accordance to them and what they think is right. Even the guys that unleashed this evil, they had a reason for it, and I think it's that bad. If you've got beliefs, stick by them. Do whatever you feel you have to do to to make your point. I'm not telling people to go out and start ending the world. But apart from that, I don't know that there probably is towards the end of the trilogy more of a moral, but for Acolyte, it's really, it sets the groundwork for what's about to come, but it's very much based on people's beliefs and their willingness to almost die for those beliefs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very well said, Mr. Chris. So where do people buy your books?
You can find them on Amazon. I think that's so Acolyte in particular is one, like I mentioned. I have just recently re-released, self-published under my own publishing name of Dead Men's Tales Publishing, hence where Dead Men Talk podcast comes from. But you can find it on Amazon. It's available for Kindle at the moment. I am going to be re-releasing it as a paperback eventually. I want to get all 3 books out there on Kindle first, so that people can start enjoying them as quickly as possible. I think my other books you will be able to find other places. You know, if you put my name into things like Barnes and Noble, Waterstones, things like that. But the main place you'll find me is on Amazon.
Yes, and we're gonna talk about your book 2 and book 3 on the following week.
Sounds good. Can't wait.
Yeah, let's empower a writer like Mr. Chris. Give them support. They give their best. So let's support them, people. And shout out to the people listening in Ghana. I'm number 42. And thank you so much. Kenya. In Kenya, I'm number 66. Jamaica at number 67. Myanmar on 119. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast.
Oh, well done. Well done.
And Singapore at 141. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chris. What else you can say about Acolyte?
Go out and buy it, really. If I'm going to say anything, no. If you enjoy, particularly this time of year, dark nights are rolling in. It's perfect to have a dark book to go along with it. So, if you like, James Herbert, Stephen King, Clive Barker, I've been compared to as well. Something with a bit of a creep factor, and one that I have been told you'll struggle to put down or read with the lights off, then definitely start with Acolyte. If you like it, there's more to come. So hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Definitely. If you have a movie contract, is it the same title of the book, or you want to change it?
No. Oh, that is a great question. I love that. I wouldn't want to be honest. Now, I'll be lying if I said I hadn't thought about this over and over about whether it'd be picked up, for film rights and whatever. It all depends. If someone wanted to release it as a trilogy, I would be like, no, please keep the title, because I love the title, and I it's one that just came to me one day. It's one that I didn't really have to think about, and it links perfectly to the book. If they felt the need to just wrap it up in one book, the whole trilogy in one movie, yeah, probably fine. We'll come to some arrangement. But no, if it went out as it is, please don't.
Yes. So calling out Netflix, Apple, Amazon.
There we go. I will also say that Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund, I got the pleasure of meeting it a few years ago, and I gifted him a copy of the book, and I've actually got a great picture of I did a photo up with him, and he's there, Freddy glove as well, reading my book, looking shocked as anything. And so I was kind of hoping something might come of that, but there we go. Never mind.
Yes, calling out there. Come on, let's try Mr. Chris trilogy. It's one of a kind, better than Lord of the Rings.
There you go. Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Chris, thank you so much. Talk to you next week.
Thank you, Daniel. Look forward to it.
More to come, people. See you soon.